Show with the VSys voices this morning. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Dana. How are you?
Good. Hi, everyone. And we also want to point out that joining us today is a very special guest cameo, just like on a major TV show having a special guest star. Marie Howell, CVA, is
Yay!
here as well. She's gonna pipe in a couple times, and she's also here for our Q&A, general open discussion that we get into. And yeah, let's just get rolling. We've got some folks here, and you should know us by now. I'm Dana, and here is Todd.
I'm
And
Todd.
yay! And
It's the
Lisa's
Dana and Todd show.
it's the Data and Tacho. And Lisa's driving the deck and all the good tech stuff behind the scenes. But yeah, let's just roll right into how we suggest and then have open discussion about learning events, learning journeys, and training of professional development overall of our staff and volunteers. And we're going to start off by kind of just asking folks, um, are staff and volunteers now with your agency, are they learning together? Are they getting the same level or types of trainings for roles or tasks or duties or specialties? And I just kind of want to hear about that. And
There's a Slido we just launched for that. If people remember how to activate Slido in the lower right-hand corner of your screens, there will be a little poll up there. It just says it, and it's just going to do some word clouds for us. Okay, I'm sorry, Dana. Go ahead.
No, that was perfect time. Speaking of perfect segues, thank you, Todd. And we've also got going in the chat. If for whatever reason the Slido isn't popping up for you, you don't see it, you can answer in chat. But we also have a fun little thread going in chat of, hey, where are you beaming in from today? And as you heard, as we were logging on, I am in not at all sunny San Francisco this week. But we want to kind of see where folks are from, some familiar faces. If anyone is new, we've got a lot of kind of good Eastern Southern representation today. New Orleans and Charleston, and Lisa's in New York, and Todd's in Utah, and
Utah.
Utah, and we've got Michelle from DC. But yeah, let us know are you getting Slido answers pulling together? Who can see
We
their
have
Slido?
few votes, yes, that our staff and volunteers are learning together. Thank you for responding, folks.
Yay!
Reminder, Slido button, lower right-hand corner. All right, moving on.
So if we're talking about some kind of diving into specialty training, and just in the agencies I've been with, and I know there's always a great representation of healthcare organizations in our audience, but whatever sector you're in, you can always find workshops or webinars or certifications, or do the training in-house with yourself as an in-house expert, as leader of volunteers, on leadership, communication. I've particularly had success with kind of board and staff and volunteer services communication, little workshops and webinars that I've done as in-service things with agencies over the years. Project management is a really good kind of specialty training for folks to have either suggest that they get for their role developing and leadership development, or a member of your team, paid or unpaid, staff or volunteer, may say, hey, there's this cool workshop and I think that'll help us achieve whatever you're trying to achieve at the moment. And you can decide to put that into a budget item. And particularly because I've worked with a lot of agencies where we've had educational docents and different kinds of volunteers working with kids and families, like on their own. Did specialty workshops about that, including mandated reporter training, but we'll talk about that a little later on. You may have therapy animals or some sort of animal handling that can training, or at least policies, training people on policies around therapy animals, so there's no confusion around that, or service animals if people are bringing their own service animals in. I found that's very helpful. And then everyone's favorite topic, and I just did this for the Barrel Institute webinar with Karina and Andrea a couple weeks ago, of diversity, equity, inclusion, access, justice, whatever acronyms you want to use. We happen to use JEDI. And then, and I think that for me, with every agency I've been with, no matter if we've been conservation or after school programs, or food and food insecurity support, safety, emergency response, I think that's probably the most common training that's has to be the same for staff and volunteers, so that everybody knows their role and what to do and where to go in the case of fire, earthquake, whatever natural or person-made emergency or disaster could occur. And then, of course, any new policy, procedure, regulation, law gets passed that impacts patient relationships, whatever that may be. So really just kind of having a standardized way to keep everyone updated and on the same page in any volunteer or staff position is kind of what we're talking about today. So, and let us know in chat if you've done any of these with your team. I'm hoping to hear that safety and emergency response training has been done with everybody, but some of these other ones may be may seem not directly related to the work you're doing, but they can all be quite helpful for everyone to know and no one to get contradictory answers or confusion in the heat of a moment or an incident, and just kind of keep everything running smoothly and keep that understanding between paid and unpaid members of your team that we are all in this together, and kind of learning together helps cement all of that. Next slide, please. Human resources. So, of course, you want to, as much as possible, coordinate or at the very least communicate with human resources if that's a different department. Sometimes volunteer services and an org structure falls within human resources, but if it's a different department, keep that communication really free flowing and open, and line up whatever courses staff are already doing and see if it's necessary for some volunteers to do it. And again, one example from a conservation agency where we had educational docents, going out on hikes or doing group teachings in libraries with kids and families, was we knew that, and we communicated very clearly that our volunteers are not legally considered mandated reporters. They do not have a legal obligation to report suspected neglect or child abuse if they're interacting with kids and families, or if they witness a family member, being abusive to a kid during a session, which almost never happened, but was nice to have them be trained to that. But as a government special district agency, all of the staff, including me and everyone in volunteer services, we all were legal mandated reporters, and we're in California, so we had to do the state online course once a year for like an hour, and you take a little quiz and you certify that you understand this. So we chose to have our volunteer docents and educational volunteers who were doing this kind of outreach with kids and families to just have that same level of certification. And again, made it really clear it's not your legal obligation, but they at least understood the entire process. So there was never a question of, did a volunteer react make mistakes or react inappropriately or not follow a right incident report procedure, whereas a staff would have to do that. So we found that was really helpful. Also, again, service animals, animal handling, if you have therapy animals. And my favorite one that everyone got sent to is conflict resolution. It's also sometimes called verbal judo or de-escalation.
I love verbal judo.
I love a good conflict resolution workshop because of that actually helps everybody's communication with each other overall. It helps people not get their buttons pushed, or know how to respond, not with irritation or anger right away, but to kind of recognize that and say, this is how I can keep the energy neutral if something's starting to get really emotionally charged. And we know that in hospitals and healthcare, or just dealing with the public in general, that's something that's been happening, unfortunately, more and more and more. So I found that extremely useful. And then again, you are the in-house experts on volunteer engagement, so your own workshops with staff or leader volunteers on what your policies are and how to handle things for volunteer services, and just get everyone up to speed. And another example from the special district land conservation agency I was with is I actually was doing some communication and, again, working with kids and families in conflict resolution workshops, often myself as the trainer, sometimes bringing in someone else. But the system that I created that should have been the same for staff HR, but wasn't at the time, was checking off that, people have signed up that they've done this in-person workshop, and they've signed that they've understood it, or they've got a little pop quiz at the end and they've passed it, or they've done this online certification. So I actually helped our HR department, which was still kind of growing from one person wearing too many hats, to have the same standards for paid staff as volunteers. But in my case, it was the reverse order, where it started in volunteer services as kind of the best practice for documenting trainings and recording it in the VMS, and then having HR catch up to that. So that's not usually the case, but that was kind of an interesting example from my own career that has occurred. So always line up with human resources as much as you possibly can. And Todd's going to tell us about what the benefits are of working and learning together as one team.
Excellent. Thank you, Dana. Okay, so we've learned an awful lot from you. Thank you, Dana, about whether we should be doing the trainings and with whom, like HR, and a lot of different other kind of the tactical side of the trainings. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of if you're putting together a training, well, what the heck goes into it? And of course, that's a massive topic. We will not be able to get through all of it, but just a kind of summary, there is so much that could be said, about team-based learning, experiential learning, which are different types. What we call, that is Dana and I, funification in your trainings, okay, whether it's experiential or team-based or individual or whatever, and the importance of socializing during the training, okay, whether that's virtual, which is one type of socialization, which by the way is psychologically quite different than the in-person type of socialization that occurs when people are all in a room together. And we just don't have the time today to get you into a lot of that, but we have put up other webinars that you might recall in the past, like Dana and I's gamification webinar that we did last year, and you'll find those on the VSys pages. We might be getting into some of those other topics in the future because I think they're really good.
Mhm.
But we think the training of volunteers needs to be part skills and part motivation, which is a lot of where that socialization comes in. Even if it means entertaining them a bit, it's still good. And we've learned, and any elementary school teacher will tell you, I think, okay, that if you can keep the kids slightly entertained, their brains are more engaged. And when I've volunteered in my kids' fourth and fifth grade classrooms, that's certainly been the case, when I'm teaching them different stuff. So yeah, we do want a little bit of entertainment and relax, have fun. These are, again, just very general tips. Um, I'm going to stop here and ask, and there's a Slido on it. How have your trainings also improved volunteer motivation? And there's a couple of you that are having trouble with Slido. I think it might be because of we haven't told you how to access it exactly. There should be in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, I think it's an apps, APPS button. Is that correct? And then if you click that, one of the options I believe is Slido. Am I doing that right? Because it's a little different for me as a presenter. So,
It's
um,
the three little boxes in the right-hand corner, Todd,
it's in the lower
the three
right-hand corner.
little
Okay.
dice.
Three little dice. All right. Yeah, it's different for me. All right. So you should see, or the three little dice, you should now see a Slido. And I'm waiting for votes on how have your trainings improved volunteer motivation? There are some options for you.
And Todd, if you read the options for Slido, because Trudy's saying no Slido available, and we've had that issue before. Slido gets a little bit buggy when it interacts with WebEx. But Todd, if you repeat the question again, and maybe some of the choices of answers, or fill in, because we're getting Jenny's, they're just not seeing the Slido, then we can have them answer in chat, and we can also,
Okay.
get this
Yep.
into open discussion. Yeah.
Option one of and I'm looking for something not specific here, but we are trying to gauge this so that we can tailor a little bit. We're looking for the crossover between the trainings that you're doing and how motivated your volunteers are. So question is, how have your trainings improved volunteer motivation? Option one, volunteers enjoy learning. Option two, volunteers are just tolerating our trainings right now. Option number three, actually, they've made matters worse. Okay, our trainings are, that's going down the hill. And the fourth possible answer is, I don't know. Okay, we really don't have much for training going on. So I'm just trying to get a gauge for where everybody's at. And I do
Yeah.
And
have
I'll
one
put this
response
in the
back. I have two
chat
votes
as
back.
well, Todd.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the
Excellent.
chat. So thank you, Lisa, for putting that in the chat. And Michelle and Trudy are like, option two, volunteers kind of tolerate it.
Thank you.
This is good to know. And are you getting any Slidos? Or some people
I
able to
am.
see the Slido?
There's
Okay,
two people
okay.
who have responded saying volunteers enjoy learning. So it's working for
Okay.
some of you. That's
That's why we
always
have
good.
chat. Yeah,
Yeah.
always fall back to chat. I think that, I mean, that's been Yeah, and Mayra in LA also getting California wet weather is this
They're
option
tolerating it.
too. Yeah. And I think that's pretty common and kind of that's where that maybe gamification or funification comes into play because we've all sat through, the sunglasses in the back of class, leaning back, trying not to show that you're sleeping. We've all had those moments in our
Oh,
lives.
I'm sorry, Dana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it happens all the time. Learning events. But that's, part of that is the trainer you're bringing in or the training you're doing, or if it's online, it's in pre-recorded. So, sometimes it's harder to get that engagement, or if they're just watching a movie, like again, you're in the 6th grade and the teacher's like, we're watching a movie now. But that's part of that funification or that basic engagement that we're looking at. And we can also give you some tips, especially in the open discussion, on how to get people to actually like enjoy or be interested or engaged in the training versus just kind of putting up with it as something they have to do. But that's great. And Marie herself says it depends on the training. If it's the annual review, it's a bit of an eye roll. Yeah, because your review staff
Oh,
people know. But the monthly in-service, which is topical, they suggest, then they love it. And that's something to balance too, is this redundant information that you're only checking a box and doesn't really add value to anybody's knowledge or skill level, or is this something that they're already interested in or that they've suggested as a topic or as a specialty training that's automatically going to get a little bit more interest and fun and engagement if it's something that feels genuinely useful.
yeah.
And Mayra or Myra, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. I believe it's because we mostly do mandated trainings, annual trainings, but we try to make it fun, like say a dad joke at the beginning or the end of the
That's right.
training. Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. Sometimes, especially in highly regulated industries like healthcare or government agencies, there are certain things that you really just have to check the box once a year. And again, we did this for mandated reporting, online state training, but there is a way to make it interesting or fun, or someone completes something and they get a certificate or a goofy little novelty toy or some other
Dollar store is
fun
our favorite
mention,
place.
dollar
Yep.
stores, stuff
Yep.
like that. So there are ways to make that kind of fun and interesting. Oh, cool. Thank you. I want to talk about this when we get into open discussion too.
Yeah, I have to do a quick call out. We have with us today, and I'm so glad that she showed up, Sid Heim from the Missouri Department of Conservation. The only reason I'm mentioning you, said I'm not trying to put you on the spot, is that we know you do so many trainings. All right, this is a
Yeah.
statewide agency, and I would love to hear if you have time later on, you could share with us what some of the challenges are that you're facing, because that is a big organization. So.
Yeah, and having worked a lot with conservation agencies myself, like I feel you, Sid. I feel the
Yeah,
pain.
it could be rough.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I feel you.
all
Cool.
right, we'll talk later. Um, okay, so I just want to conclude by saying, hey, look, whether you're virtual or on-site, both of these things can be social and they can be socialized. If you're doing online training, then the convenience and efficiency tend to be even greater than face-to-face, believe it or not. That's what the studies are showing, all right? And people tend to say, they kind of keep themselves engaged, possibly by doing other things on other screens. If you're on site, it actually becomes even more important, therefore, that you entertain and keep them engaged and moving. So those were my points. Dana, it's back to you.
Thanks, Todd. Back
Oh,
to me.
yeah.
Back to Dana for the
Oh,
weather.
no, wait. It's me. All right.
Yeah, no, I thought I'm pretty sure it's still you, and we
Okay.
got we got some
Um,
more questions to ask.
Yeah, no, I have one more question to ask, and it's not a Slido, so everybody for those who are whatever, is how many of you have certifications in our profession? And you can just put in that certification, whatever it is, whether it's CVA or CAVS, CAVS, or whatever else it is, in chat, if you would please. And Michelle's the CVA, thank you. I mentioned somebody out there is CAVS. Or if you have any other certification related to our profession, please drop it in there because we're going to be talking a little bit about it. And that's my segue into Dana.
Thank you,
Thank
Todd.
you. Whew, got it. Sorry,
Speaking
Slade.
Yeah, speaking of perfect segues. So I am a CVA, certified in volunteer administration. I know we've got Marie's got CVA and CAV, so she's got the whole enchilada. Jenny's a CVA, Trudy's a CVA, Michelle W is a CVA. So I'm glad to see so many in the Cool Kids Club because, as you know, if you are a CVA or the few few people on the call who may not be yet, this is our only global certification in the knowledge, the practical knowledge and experience for our sector. So if you have been curious about the CVA or just want to learn more, cvacert.org is the place to go. And then the CAVS, specifically for American healthcare system, and I know sometimes we get some folks from Canada, but I didn't see in the chat if any are here today. But CAVS is specific to leading volunteers in our incredibly complex healthcare system, and that's been taken over by the Barrel Institute. So now they're in that pipeline and in that process of certification for CAVS. So I'm glad to see in the chat that a bunch of folks have these professional certifications, and I have also when I've been with organizations that have volunteers leading big projects or teams of other volunteers, and they've been doing it for a while and they're pretty good at it, even if they're unpaid with our agency, I have encouraged them, and with one agency is actually able to get professional development budget to get some of the volunteers who themselves were leaders of volunteers interested in the CVA. And then I know of at least 2 of them that went on and like that became their career, and then they got paid positions. So again, this professional development of not just yourself, but other members of your team, either paid or unpaid, who are regularly dealing with volunteers. I think it's incredibly important to encourage them, if there's the means or within the agency budget, to get the CAVS or the CVA. And again, that just lifts up the knowledge and the skills and knowing the expertise of the entire team, and kind of helps keep everything consistent and rolling along very, very well. So yay, CVA and CAVS.
Go people.
Go people, yay. And hopefully most or all of you also know about ALIVE, Association of Leaders in Volunteer Engagement. And we're going to, again, in just a moment, have Marie talk about community practice for healthcare. But something that's recently changed in the last 6 months or so is ALIVE has taken over the Entity Service Enterprise Program. So this means your entire organization can go through service enterprise training as an organization and have a strategic volunteer engagement and kind of best practices and latest practices woven into your strategic planning pillars, woven into the foundation of all of your policies. So it's really a comprehensive diagnostic training, coaching, certification, and again, you plug into a peer network of other service enterprise certified organizations. And this, for years, this lived with the Points of Light Foundation and Institute, and ALIVE has recently taken over management of that program. So that's something to look into as an entire organization to get that kind of level of expertise, and again, that consistency of good experience for anyone coming to volunteer and work with your agency. So that's just a little piece of how an organization can get professional development. Go ahead.
If you hadn't noticed a little bit of pride there in Dana's voice, she's a past president of ALIVE 4 or 5 years ago. And so it's kind of like, and she was laying the groundwork for this, so she's pretty excited about it. I am myself one of the founders of ALIVE 5 years before that, which should date me a little bit. But, so we're looking at ALIVE, we're going, oh yeah, good job. You're finally pulling it together on training. And so, yeah, go check them out. And I'm sorry, Dana, were you done?
Yeah,
Okay,
again,
all right.
it's like we're psychic enough at this point, Todd, to know like when we're
I felt like because we
handing the
presented how many
baton
times?
off to you, and you still have the baton, so you get to run
All
with the
right.
baton for a couple
So
more slides.
our next concept, we're going to be talking just really fast, and then after this, we're going to do sort of a tour of resources and websites and consultants and stuff like that, and then open up the mic. But my last concept that I want to get across is the connection between skill building during training, which is obviously very important, one of the biggest reasons, and boosting of morale. Not just maybe morale, but morale and effectiveness and cohesion in the team. I'm kind of the team guy. So we found that by promoting, and I can say this too, by promoting volunteers as a result of the training, and I mean from position A to position B, that's also another way to make them feel valued, avoid burnout, spark and respark motivation. So I want to summarize there. Skill building can help with morale and cohesion and effectiveness and promotions, and they all kind of work together. And then if you can also do something else that we talked about in previous webinars, which is align your programs, the programs themselves, which is the things the volunteers are doing, with standards that the volunteers have bought into, like the social determinants of health, all right, then that also is a motivator. It's like, why do I go to this training? Well, I go to this training because I'm actually helping people. Well, how do we know that I'm helping people? Well, we know because my program is aligned with the social determinants of health, which means that I'm addressing whatever the determinant is. It could be homelessness, it could be poverty, it could be, food deprivation, the challenges that we face in our communities, which do walk through the doors of our hospitals and walk through the doors of our agencies all the time. And so the concept I'm trying to convey is that there's a lot of sort of the non-tactical motivation type stuff, okay, that goes into a good training and goes into whether or not the volunteer feels as if the volunteer is having a good experience while in the training. And whether or not they're getting promotions, addressing social determinants, all of those are factors, and having a good social experience. So just wanted to convey that. We do have some other webinars, the VSys page, go to that again if you want to review, especially October of 2021, when we were talking about the HCAP surveys and tying your programs into hospital and healthcare standards on patient experience. And then in January of 2022, we did the social determinants on health, of health, and how those all go together. Before I move on, this is your cue to put the link up, Dana, all right, for this brand new research that came out from the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement, which is another place that Dana can take a bow. This brand new article that came out encourages nonprofit leaders to actually ask for funding from your volunteer services, from your volunteers for services, and among many other things. But what's really cool about this report is that it goes into the depth with lots and lots. How many people did you survey, Dana? Hundreds.
Over a thousand nonprofit leader entities and several hundred funders. So it really is addressing. There's a gap, and the data now proves it, between leaders of organizations, CEOs, executive directors, general managers, knowing to ask in grants for funds specifically for volunteer engagement or development or volunteer services overall, and funders never getting asked, so they never earmarked funds for it. So there's been this disconnect, and the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement did the research and is coming out with kind of toolkits and playbooks on how to have those conversations as leaders of volunteers, or if you're running an agency or director of a department, or if you are in charge of writing grants or approving grants, if you work on a foundation side of something, of just getting those conversations and that connection so that we do get very specific earmarked funding for volunteer services. Because what all this research proved is, hey, if you don't ask, you don't get, and funders actually will fund this if they're specifically asked for it and they understand the mission impact done by volunteers. So it's you can do a light skim with some highlights on that website, or you can deep dive into all of the research, which is what I like to do. So thank you,
Right,
Tom,
and
for
did
bringing
do,
that
or
up.
we wouldn't have that. And the reason why I mention it in connection with training is because there's some wonderful graphics in there about the connections between volunteer motivations and funders and their motivations. And those graphics go really well in trainings. And you can put them into decks. And volunteers they like to be educated. They like to see the bigger picture. They like to see where they fit in the grand scheme of things, how they're improving the social determinants, how they're improving financial strength, even of your organization. I mean, these are adults in most cases. They're educated in most cases. They want more education, and that engages their brains. Okay, I'm done.
It's a lot of good stuff to cover.
That is a lot. All
It's a
right.
lot of great stuff. So I think quickly in the next section, so we can kind of
Next
run
slide.
through a few things, and just kind of remind you again, just in the off chance you don't know these exist, Alive exists. If anyone is beaming in from Canada, the version in Canada is VMPC, Volunteer Management Professionals of Canada, and hopefully again, since there's a pretty strong, not exclusive, but very strong representation today for American healthcare healthcare systems. There's good old Shovel, Society for Healthcare Volunteer Leaders, which you may also have membership to. And then again, going thinking globally, International Association for Volunteer Effort. I'm also a member of IAVE. And again, when I was working with government agencies, both city and special district and state for many years, a huge part of my career, I was in NAVPLUG, one of the most fun acronyms in any of our sector, National Association of Volunteer Programs in Local Government. So whether you're with a local volunteer center, Dovia, local association, like, I know LA's got a really strong local association that also is a part of Alive. You, as an individual or your organization, may be a part of one or all of these. And that's another great network to plug into for webinars, resources, cool ideas, wisdom in the room, just to kind of bounce questions and troubleshoot when you're not in webinars like this. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out, and we'll do a run through on the slides, and really the next few slides are so that you have the links more easily to these organizations. And Melissa and Karina from VSys, thank you, Lisa, will be at the Shovel conference next week, and stop by and say hi to them. So Volunteer Alive is that website if you want to join, or again, look up Service Enterprise. And then we get into, we're going to kind of chug along here, Lisa. And
but we better stop on 12 here.
oh, yeah. And this is where we put the spotlight on Marie. Thank you for the reminder, Todd. Marie!
So
talk about communities of practice.
one of the things that Alive does is it runs these communities of practice for different segments of the volunteerism profession, and there's ones for all sorts of different folks. Okay, but the one that is actually run for healthcare by Alive is co-chaired by our own Marie Howell, who would like to take a minute. Thank you, Marie, and talk about it. So maybe you guys can join if you want to join. This is where I have to put in my caveat, okay? Because I am, Lisa's here, but I'm a VSys employee. We have to give the disclaimer here that some of these, including Alive, there are fees associated with joining Alive. It's really nominal. I think it's $75 a year for an individual, all right, to get into Alive, and then you can join a community of practice. But we are not endorsing, we are not requiring, we are not suggesting, we are just saying, hey, look, the topic today is training, and there are some great resources out there. And if you'd like to join this community of practice, Marie, tell us all about it.
Sure. And let me say, too, that I agree, there are fees. It's a great investment in your professional future and your program, but also Alive will let you attend like a community of practice, for example, for free the first time, so you can kind of check it out, or they'll let you attend a webinar for free the first time so you can check it out and then join. So it's definitely worth looking into. So my community of practice that I lead with Angela is healthcare based. So we have people who participate who are in hospitals, hospices, elderly living, just everything you can imagine that's related to healthcare, clinics. And we meet every other month, and we suggest a topic that we start with, and we always veer off on something else because somebody brings something up and we all go in that direction. So if it's a topic that we plan a topic, but that doesn't mean we're going to stick with it the whole time. We go where the need exists, depending on who's participating in the community of practice. So, of course, we'll talk about recruitment, retention. Last month, we were talking about April and the annual recognition events we were doing, and I had brought my topic was the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, the book by Gary Chapman and Paul White that we read as our book club topic in Alive. And I really liked that there was a lot about ongoing recognition in that. So the April, of course, is a big month for us, but we want to be recognizing our volunteers every day and understanding how they like to be recognized. So that was our topic. We talked about it at length, and I got some great ideas from some of the other attendees, and we were able to share ideas. So I never leave one of the community practices without having written something down that I hadn't thought of before, which that is tremendous because I've been in this for over 20 years. So new ideas do not come, fast and furiously, but they do if you look for them. So we've discussed food pantries in the hospital, Something else I want to get started here. We do meal bags for the parents if they need food, but having an actual food pantry where when they're discharged, they can take a whole bag of groceries home rather than have to worry about getting their child settled in and then somehow getting to a grocery store. I think that's a really neat idea. We're talking about our teen volunteer programs in May, starting a program or improving a program, coming up with new ideas to engage teens. And especially since now that our teens are getting a lot more information in high school and coming out of high school as medical assistants and sous chefs and all kinds of things. So we want to offer them more challenges than we used to. And community practice is a great way to touch base with your peers and just improve your program and look at things a different way and hear what others are doing and knowing that you're on the right track and coming up with new ideas as well. So
Excellent.
I really love it.
Sounds like almost just a it sounds like what we're doing here, but with just straight peers all just talking amongst themselves about
Exactly.
exactly what they're facing and what they're dealing with and how to deal with and getting ideas. And that's great. That's what a good community of practice is about. And Lisa's been good enough to put the link for how to get into that up into the website or up, I'm sorry, into the chat. So you can jump in there. Lisa, if you could jump onto the next slide, and the next few are going to be kind of quick. Dana's going to talk a little bit more about NavPlug, or did you really already cover that, Dana?
Yeah, I recovered it. We just wanted to, again, when you go back and review this or get the slide deck as its own download on the VSys Voices page, that you've got a little more information and the links are a little easier to follow. But again, if you're in local government, this is a great, again, just peer network. So these little pockets of peer networks or larger networks, as Maria was talking about. And, government work can be its own thing, as Sid understands. And some
Right.
others
And
of
the
you as
next
well.
slide
Yeah.
too is also just a review.
SHVL. I know some people I talk to in healthcare affectionately say the shovel word, but you're right. Thank you. It's actually technically, officially SHVL.
And there's also the Ohio Healthcare Volunteer Managers Association. And then not quite as healthcare oriented, kind of a crossover in Texas. They have the Texas Volunteer Management Conference, run by some people up in Dallas, the Volunteer Now organization, Volley. And all of them are great conferences. I've been to about half of these and had very successful experiences. And so next slide, please, Lisa. We're just going to kind of cruise through here and then give some time for helping all of you guys directly and doing some Q&A. So more resources. And again, this next service are just resources. This is a resource, the Energize Inc. website. If you haven't been up there, it's got a lot of good material on how to put together a training. And in the past, there's just go there. Explore. I'll just leave it at that. It was started by a wonderful friend of ours by the name of Susan Ellis, who for many, many years was the one we call the guru of volunteerism, wrote many, many books on the subject, which are still available out there. And she also founded what has become the Engage Journal, which Dana and I just published an article in last month, which we're pretty excited about. And you can subscribe to that too. But again, the disclaimer, these are paid things sometimes. Some of the resources are, some of them aren't. So we are not endorsing, we are just sharing, okay, that there are some resources out there. Now we're going to talk just really fast about some of the direct consultants. If you actually do have a budget, you want to pay some people who are out there to help you put together your trainings and get ideas on how to present them, sometimes even do your trainings, the following are possibilities that you could call. All right, so dive into the next one, please, Elisa. Professional consultants, particularly if you do anything with animals. The Adissa group is fantastic. Your pet therapy, all that kind of stuff. They're run by a wonderful friend of ours named Betsy McFarland out of Florida, if I'm not recalling.
No,
she's in DC?
She's in DC. Yeah.
She's in DC. Okay.
Yeah. Maryland, DC. Yeah.
All right. And just moving on, next slide.
Hey, that's me.
I recognize this one. Do you want to talk about this one, Dana?
Well, you get a lot of my time and knowledge within these VSys Voices things. But if you want a specialty training or one of my own other original webinars, or you just want a consultant for your organizations coming in and evaluating and helping to update systems or make things easier to work with, then hey, I'm here for that too. But hey, you get a lot of my time with the VSys Voices. But there's even more fun over on my website and YouTube channel, which we'll get to.
Yeah, and Lisa's actually just reminding me, our own Paul Falkowski, who did
Yes, Paul.
last month's presentation. He's a
Mhm.
great one. Lisa, would you mind putting his link up in chat? And then we'll move on to the next one. Our friend Toby Johnson has been doing this forever. Lots of great studies on volunteerism up there. She has a podcast, some wonderful people who have written. She does a lot of research. So if you're looking
Yeah,
for the
she's the research
cerebral,
queen. Yeah.
yeah, the cerebral stuff. Okay, what is the science of volunteerism? I would hit her. I would hit the Institute
Hmm.
link that that
We
Dana
put
put
in
up.
chat before.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
put up in chat before. And I don't know, what about the National Association, Dana? I hadn't thought about them. We should have put them. Do you want to?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of connected through the Initiative for Strategic Volunteer Engagement. The work that I did around that was with the National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement, which is just again a loose umbrella group um, of Alive and Volunteer Match and Points of Light and MAVA and other organizations where we're all kind of pitched in together to find the researchers and fund the researchers, including Dr. Sue Carver-Kale, and kind of helped create the initiative as it is now, and that playbook and that toolkit that's coming out. So, there's a lot of this kind of national behind the scenes level that's been going on, and a lot of the consultants that we're sharing with you today have been to some degree involved with that. So we know and trust and love their work. And thank you for putting Paul's volunteer leader stuff up there, because Paul has been fantastic with elder care, especially in elder health care and hospice and things like that. Has been kind of his specialty, so that's worth looking into in the chat.
Okay, one last one. Next slide, Beth.
Beth.
Thank you.
Yay.
Beth, yeah, we love Beth. Just very professional training. And I think that is really where we're going to end. Okay, so you've got all the links, and they'll be up on the website, of course, because this whole deck will be up on the website, as
Mhm.
well as this recording of today will be up there, so you can pull that. I did mention the National Alliance. I believe that's allianceforgood.org. Is that right?
No, it's
It's
all
it's all for
for.
good.
No, nope,
No,
nope.
no, I'm gonna get.
Let
I'm
let
gonna
let
shut up.
let me say the actual things.
Sorry, it's
And I'll,
changed.
and I'll put it in the chat as well. It's all for the number 4, all for engagement.org. So I will put that
I
in
got
the
it.
chat.
There it is.
And the website did change in the last year or so, but we don't want anyone to be confused because a lot of things use engagement
Right,
in
right.
there.
Okay, so
There
lots
we
of
go.
good resources. Last slide, please, Lisa.
Going to more things, and here we are in the brainstorm session. And any questions you have for us or for Marie, or we can just get open discussion and the wisdom in the room.
I thought I'd start that out by
Yeah.
launching a Slido that
Mm-hmm.
says, hey, what are your takeaways from today's webinar? Maybe that would help us jog some thinking and talking here. Sid, you very graciously offered to
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about Missouri's massive training program. So I'd love to hear more about that. Let's see.
And I believe Lisa, as host, or maybe you do, Todd, I know I don't, has the power to unmute folks if for some reason they can't unmute themselves too.
Unmuted poor Sid, so she's on the
Yay.
spot.
Thank you, Sid.
Yay, Sid.
Tell us more about what's going on in Missouri and what are your challenges there? Sid, are you there?
Background noise in my office.
Oh,
Gotcha. We got you now. Thank you.
So I'll try to just do this in a brief nutshell, maybe just a couple lessons learned, but we have multiple volunteer programs at the Department of Conservation. And some of them are specific to our department. They're facility based for the most part, like volunteers at our nature centers and our shooting ranges / outdoor education areas. And then we have specific programs, like we have volunteers that help teach hunter education. And we have some volunteers that specifically do fishing education. And then on another arena, we have programs that are with partners. So they are with another agency or another nonprofit. So there we have like our Stream Team program and our Master Naturalist program. So when it comes to training, every single one of those have their own training specific to their program, which has its benefits because, then the volunteer is getting the skills and knowledge specific to the area in which they are volunteering. That being said, I think the downside of that is we don't have continuity across across training for our volunteers. In particular, when it comes to just some of our, basic Department of Conservation policies and processes. So it's a pretty big balancing act in trying to think that everybody that's volunteering for the Department of Conservation that's walking across the state or in their own area, and they are literally representing the department, but they come at it with a different knowledge and skill set. We've started to recognize this in particular with our facilities, and for that I mean our nature centers and our shooting ranges. Years ago, we had a very stringent, very detailed, very time-intensive training for all of those volunteers. And there were, a lot of thoughts from different decision makers that we were spending too much time on training. If somebody's working the front desk at a shooting range or a nature center, do they really need 40 hours of training to do that? So the department as a whole started kind of backpedaling and going a little bit different direction and leaving the training up to the individual facilities. So now that pendulum swung the other direction, and we are realizing that we've got volunteers that are not even getting training in the core policies or core priorities of the department. So now we're back in discussion of trying to put together, at least a basic training unit that every single volunteer is going to have to go through. That becomes time and staff intensive. So how do we deliver that? So looking at some, online options. And so we have been in a position, I'm saying, where we've had the pendulum swing both ways, and we've got to figure out what that middle ground is.
Excellent. So that is a huge challenge. I mean, that is a lot of volunteers going through a lot of trainings on a massive scale. And that pendulum fascinates me, wanting to create some efficiencies, and fewer time demands. Okay, so the volunteers stay more motivated and engaged that way. But at the same time, then you lose the centralization, the quality. I mean, that fascinates me. How do you marry the two? And I like your approach of saying, okay, we're going to tailor. Okay, we're going to tailor the training track, if you will, to the volunteer based on what their responsibilities are. They're going to need this combination of skills, and maybe breaking it down. Would it make sense to break it down into smaller segments? Or how would you approach that? I just don't even know. This is a good topic for maybe all of us to chime in on.
I actually solved that problem with some of my municipal agencies in my special district. And so again, Sid, I'm interested in, you explained you're kind of at the beginning of finding that balance. The balance we found with the special district, and then the zoo, San Francisco Zoo, which is a weird combination of part of it's managed by the city of San Francisco and part of it's managed by a nonprofit. So that was another very siloed thing to bridge. But we had core messaging and policy training about the agency and volunteerism and regulations in general for all volunteer staff and paid staff and volunteers to learn. And that wasn't that hard. That was like an hour. And lately it's been, I'm not with those agencies anymore, but lately it's been online or asynchronous training. And then when I was back there some years ago, it was in person. And then the specialty training for, again, are they at a visitor center? Are they at the motorcycle range? Are they at the gun range? Are they at the wildlife rescue rehab nonprofit that we partner with? So that's kind of how we approached it. But yeah, Sid, I'm interested to see what comes of it with your program, finding that kind of Goldilocks zone in that middle zone.
Well, and Maurice just pointed out as well in chat, if you're watching this, that there's another dimension. Not only do we need to balance those extremes, okay, on the pendulum, but also engage diverse volunteer populations and the whole topic of diversity. How do we get DEI into our trainings, and how do we assure that it's occurring? Okay, because now you've got the pendulum on the one side of quality. We've got to assure that it's happening, and accountability versus, okay, this is boring the heck out of us, and it's too hard to get through down on the other side. How do we balance that? It sounds like you had some great things, that you learned in your work there, Dana. Who else can chime in? Marie, yeah.
Yeah, and to Marie's point again, like the American healthcare industry is very, very heavily regulated and has a lot of requirements and
Does.
boxes to check and things to make sure are precisely in compliance. So that adds another complication to that factor, that it's even more regulated than government agencies.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds
Can
me
confirm. Yeah.
of the years when I was training for the company that I worked for. We deployed the VMS for the entire Marine Corps, and I was going from base to base to base doing training, and every single one of the base commanders had a different take, on how they wanted to use their volunteers, and yet we had to fit national policy, and then make it tailored to the particular programs that were there. So it's always a struggle. How do you balance that? And similar to Dana, we ended up I don't know if you did this, Dana. We broke it down into smaller segments that could be
Yep.
that
Yep.
followed
Exactly.
standards.
Modules, kind of
Yeah,
modules.
modules
Yeah.
that followed standards that got delivered, when and where and only to whom needed.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, because the episodic volunteers coming in to pull weeds for a weekend around the zoo or in a park, um, they get the 5 or 10 minute spiel at the beginning of the day because they're just there one day, but they get some basic information that they can then go have conversations out in their communities, and then the people who are on, say, the wildlife rescue team or are hiking, alone out to check wildlife cameras and things, like they knew the basic messaging if they ran into someone in the public, but they had very specialized training on top of that someone even in a visitor center may not need. So those modules came in really, really handy, and hopefully that helps you sit on your journey. But this is always a work in progress, finding the balance of what's engaging, what draws a diverse audience that reflects the community that we're working with or we're serving in our agency, and how do we balance our time investment in it and automate as much as possible, and balance that with genuine funification and engagement of the audience, and not that eye roll effect that folks were talking about in the chat of like, oh, the annual training, we all have to sit through. Like, yeah, we've been there, but we don't want to have that happen to our audience.
I think the point is the good training, curriculum development and presentation is tough.
Yeah.
All right. This is not, I mean, there is a science to it. That is true. But there are so many different factors to consider. How do we keep it entertaining? How do we keep it compliant? How do we keep them awake? How do we keep them engaged? What are we actually conveying? Is it really important? So that's why there are consultants on this stuff, including Dana, and the
And peer
others that we
networks
mentioned,
and
peer
professional
networks.
associations. Again, the
Yeah.
wisdom in the room. How did you solve the? You can go onto any of those alive or anywhere else in the forums, and like, how did someone solve for this? If there isn't a webinar on the topic popping up, and you probably get an answer from someone else in the exact same position.
All right. Well, we have had a wonderful webinar. That Slido is still open. Like, what are your takeaways from this webinar? And I've gotten a response or two here saying we love the abundance of resources. If you have any other comments, please drop them there. If not, I think we've got a wrap. What do you think, boss?
Yeah, I think so, co-boss. And again, we'll put up the slide of the resource links as well, just so and folks have them in this slide deck. And Lisa, you'll let us know when the recording of this with all the things will be up on the VSys Voices page. But usually it doesn't take longer than a week or so. But just a nice reminder of the links. And thank you for taking an hour and learning with us today. We appreciate that you've invested your time, and we hope that this has been interesting and valuable. And again, thank you, Marie. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, everyone who kind of shared your experiences in the chat. And again, this is about the wisdom in the room. This is a conversation that is always alive and ongoing and in progress. And you can reach us individually. You can reach me or Todd or Lisa individually pretty much anytime you want. Send an email if you have any follow-up questions, and we're happy to continue the conversation that way too.
Sure. Yeah. And if you are looking for any other resources, or which of those consultants or others that you might join knowing which agencies or organizations or whatever, give us a call. You know,
Yeah.
we're available because we've interacted with all of them for years. Okay, so
Thanks so much, everyone.
we'll
Thank
let you
you,
know.
everybody.
It's been a pleasure.
Yay!
Have a great day.